We are living in times of obvious emerging fascism that is taking on new forms, whether it be the white nationalism that certain Americans are demanding, the Christian nationalism of Moms for Liberty, the tech oligarchies and elites that are influencing the Trump administration, or the eugenicists and beyond. It feels really important to redefine and kind of really explore what fascism and anti-fascism is in this moment, in a moment where about a week ago, as far as the time that I'm recording this, the White House and the Trump administration did a roundtable on anti-fascism.
We're not going to stop at just arresting the violent criminals we can see in the streets. Fighting crime is more than just getting the bad guy off the streets. It's breaking down the organization brick by brick. Just like we did with cartels, we're going to take the same approach, President Trump, with Antifa. Destroy the entire organization from top to bottom. We're going to take them apart. Thanks to your bold leadership and the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization, which is exactly what they are, Americans will no longer tolerate their unhinged violence.
And all of the scapegoating, and scapegoating. I think many people are unaware of what fascism is or how it's showing up or how the US as a project throughout its history has been. There's going to be a lot of resources in the description. I'm also going to make a Patreon post with as many of the resources that I dug into for this video. And I hope that this becomes a touch point for people to be able to have conversations with the people around them around what fascism is and isn't. Fascists deserve to get pushed out of government and to be disincentivized from all of the horrific, dehumanizing, and disgusting things that they say and do and purport, just like someone like Charlie Kirk. So this is going to be a space where we're going to talk about this really clearly, try to synthesize things. And also I'm hoping this video is a launching pad for you to begin to dig into other resources and do your own research and synthesize your own ideas as well.
Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
in this.
Should the
human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But.
You see what it was? A non-man. They are literally trying to erase all the progress we have made in all of this time.
This is not activism, it's anarchy.
There's these through lines that are part of white supremacist organizing and militancy that never disappear. They just change the way they look because it's part of their strategy.
I think politically speaking, the Nazis were probably smarter than we were. They decided we're too visual, everybody can see us who we are, so let's start to blend in, let's start to figure out how to use computers to be a recruitment tool.
And so what you see today is you see the results of their appeal to a more mainstream white audience.
Fascism is a political system that reacts to economic crisis by invoking a mythic leader that names an other or enemy who becomes a problem to be solved via violence endorsed by the mythic leader, the nation, and its shock troops. And above all else, there is the state and the defense of the state and its hierarchy. And within this, we already can name and detect a few of the qualities. The first kind of major quality of fascism is this dedication to a mythic leader. Essentially, fascism needs to be tied to some kind of mythic past, and that mythic past is accessed by a malevolent mythic leader who claims to be prophetic or to understand the pulse of the will of the people, and how this leads into very manipulative messaging that requires people to constrain all sorts of social behavior and to demand hyper-nationalism, even more than many other political systems as we see it.
You can't handle the little viper, so you're trying to foist her off on one of the other teachers. No, Mr. Funchal. Yes, typical slothful cowardice. Listen to me, Jen. The distance the shot put goes depends upon the effort you put into it. Perspiration! If you can't handle the little brat, I'll lock her in the chokey! Get it?
And actually, we're going to read from How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley. And in one section of the book, it reads, in a 1922 speech at the Fascist Congress in Naples, Benito Mussolini declared, "We have created our myth. The myth is a faith, a passion. It is not necessary for it to be a reality. Our myth is the nation. Our myth is the greatness of the nation. And to this myth, this greatness, which we want to translate into a total reality, we subordinate," unquote. Here, Mussolini makes clear that the fascist mythic past is intentionally mythic. The function of the mythic past in fascist politics is to harness the emotions of nostalgia to the central tenets of fascist ideology: authoritarianism, hierarchy, purity, and struggle. With the creation of a mythic past, fascist politics create a link between nostalgia and the realization of fascist ideals. German fascists also clearly and explicitly appreciated this point about the strategic use of a mythological past. The leading Nazi ideologue Alfred Rosenberg, editor of the prominent Nazi newspaper, writes in 1924, "The understanding of and the respect for our own mythological past and our own history will form the first condition for more firmly anchoring the coming generation in the soil of Europe's original homeland. The fascist mythic past exists to aid in changing the perception. The patriarchal family is one ideal that the fascist politicians intend to create in society, or return to. Patriarchal family is always represented as a central part of the nation's traditions, diminished even recently by the advent of liberalism and cosmopolitanism. But why is patriarchy so strategically central to fascist politics? In a fascist society, the leader of the nation is analogous to the father in the traditional patriarchal family. The leader is the father of his nation, and his strength and power are the source of his legal authority, just as the strength and power of the father of the family in patriarchy are supposed to be the source of his ultimate moral authority over his children and wife. The leader provides for his nation, just as in the traditional family, the father is the provider. Patriarchal father's authority derives from his strength, and strength is the chief authoritarian value. By representing the nation's past as one with the patriarchal family structure, fascist politics connect nostalgia to a central organizing hierarchical authoritarian structure, one that finds its purest representation in these norms. And even going on, I was reading this other text titled "Creating a Demigod, Nazi Art, Adolf Hitler and the Cult of Personality." And in this it reads, "Hitler and Goebbels knew the importance of the image. The Führer leader had to be personified as a godlike figure. This was integral to Nazi propaganda. As the party grew in popularity, the cult of personality depicting Hitler as Germany's leader grew exponentially. A vigorous national program of art featured Hitler as the leader and extolled the mystical strength of the Nazi party. Painters portrayed could pursue art as a vocation, but only according to the rules of the Reich culture chamber. Very quickly, Nazism became an integral part of everything German." And at this point, I will make, as someone that is very against hierarchy, essentially as an anarchist, I just find it so interesting to read these distinctions about a mythic leader and a mythic past under the lens of fascism, because for me, this comes through as just like the general way that we relate to politics. I mean, every presidential election cycle, we get these cast of characters. There's this whole media campaign and propaganda entity pushed that is meant to humanize these folks and wash over the flaws and compromises that they've made, whether it be towards the conservative hegemony or the liberal elite. And we are propagandized to again and again and again. Kamala Harris isn't a person that has participated and innovated aspects of the carceral system as a prosecutor. She is instead a fun, maternal black woman who has a quirky laugh and maybe isn't as black as people think that she should be. Bernie Sanders is this cute, fun, memeable guy. And so the almost memification of politicians and presidential candidates in some ways is analogous to how fascism really pushes and purports a mythic leader. I mean, I think about the readings that I've been doing lately on Mussolini and how he was exalted because he was able to work all these agencies and make all these decisions, and one man shouldn't be able to do all this. He's so fucking powerful. I mean, I think about Hitler and how he pushed for this regime to have an entire cultural arts movement dedicated to exalting him as a godlike figure. And I think in this is embedded another question, and it's, does hierarchy and the sheer notion of political representation lead to the inevitable mythologizing of politics and politicians? But this goes back to some of the research and videos I've done on this channel about why voting isn't the answer, about how the US political system as we know it, which is in the past representative democracy or an oligarchy, which literally started with the founding fathers saying that most people aren't smart enough to govern. We need to have a political elite or politicians who are versed in civilizing society at the helm of leading this project. Even if we look at US politics as it has existed throughout much of its time, we're not even talking about indigenous genocide and the torture and subjugation and enslavement of Africans and Black folks, but as long as voting has existed and been opened up as a right for most people on Turtle Island, there's also this very clear understanding that politicians operate at a different level of intelligence and intellect, and that is why they are meant to lead. But if we're being honest about this, we would actually say that politicians make money. It's a career. Not every person enters a career in civil service for the great. Sometimes you make compromises. Sometimes those compromises are based in reforms and diplomacy. And sometimes you cover up those compromises, flaws, evils, wrongdoings with the propaganda, super PAC money. Next quality of fascism is the centralization of power. This can be very evidently seen by the Trump administration from 1.0 to 2.0, but especially if we examine Project 2025, I think a close to 900-page document that was developed by the Heritage Foundation during the 2024 presidential election to talk about the things that the Trump administration and the Conservative Party would need to do to meet the conservative kind of party's campaign. And if we're looking at the Project 2025 tracker, it states some of the latest Project 2025 executive enacted. In total, 119 objectives were completed, while 66 were in progress, the tracker found. 50 of those were completed in January 2025, the earliest days of Trump's new administration, where he implemented several wide-reaching executive orders. The administration has continued enacting pieces of Project 2025 in the following months. When we literally go into Project 2025 and you read it yourself, you can see very clearly in there, it's all throughout it, this conservative kind of theory that's presented which is known as the unitary executive theory, which basically says the executive branch of the government deserves to have full say over everything that's fucking happening. I mean, are we literally ignoring Mussolini's Italy and Hitler and Japan and all these other fucking things? It's basically saying, we don't need science, we need loyalists. I mean, why would the Trump administration hire the founder of WWE to work in the government? Just imagine what agency that would be used. Why would RFK Jr., someone who has had no medical or health experience on any kind of certifiable level, went to the Department of Health? Why would President Trump hire Elon Musk, one of, if not the richest man in the world, to be the head of the Department of Governmental Efficiency, when Elon Musk would promptly go in and use the shock troops, which are the other arms of the Department of Governmental Efficiency, to go into countless government agencies and to take data that could be personally used for his own economic interests. If the problem is the government spending too much and using too many resources, maybe we should fucking look at our military budget and the imperialism that we wage abroad, which will inevitably come back here. Next, we have invoking an internal and external enemy. It relates to populism for sure, which I'm going to define in a little bit, but it's the idea that there is someone within a nation and someone outside of a nation that is the cause of economic or social crisis. And if we're looking at Trump's version of fascism right now, immigrants are the problem because my government is spending too much money. What did the colonizers do when they came here? They used hierarchy to say that manifest destiny and the pursuit of land and expansion and civilization is a natural law that the white colonizer has. They also manipulated religion to say that the God-given directive is that some people govern society and some people are so subhuman that they need other people to enslave and profit off of them and torture them. And if we look at what animates so much of white supremacy, white nationalism, the underpinnings of the US as we know it, I mean, think to what I was speaking to earlier, how the fact that the US is a representative democracy because the founding fathers literally established that most people do not have the mental and intellectual capacities to govern. Literally, the way that we relate to politics, the way that we vote, the way that we're taught to mythologize and think about politicians and to see their jobs as distinctly different or their desire for diplomacy, it's exalting a sort of natural order when it comes to our political world that I believe it exists to hold power over others. And I don't believe that politics is essentially about power over other people. We can change our behaviors. We can build institutions and prefigurative systems. Autonomy, resistance, free association, mutual aid are all things that we can build up in our movements and social spaces to really dismantle these assumptions about hierarchy that permeate pretty much every part of our lives. And moving on. The text reads, "The natural law allegedly places men over women and members of the chosen nation of the fascist over other groupings. Nature is repeatedly invoked in fascist writing. On March 21st, 1861, Alexander H. Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy, delivered an address that has come to be known as the Cornerstone Speech. In it, he denounces the principles of liberty and equality enshrined in the U.S. Constitution as violations of the laws of nature. Quote, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea of equality. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the general truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. End quote. Cornerstone Speech makes vivid the characteristically fascist logic that liberal democratic principles are in conflict with nature and must therefore be abandoned. Quote, I recollect of once having heard a gentleman from one of the northern states of great power and ability announce in the House of Representatives with imposing effect that we of the South would be compelled ultimately to yield upon the subject of slavery, that it was as impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics or mechanics, that the principle would ultimately prevail, that we, in maintaining slavery as it exists within us, were warning against a principle founded in nature, the principle of equality of men. The reply I made to him was that upon his grounds, we should ultimately succeed, and that he and his associates in this crusade against our institutions would ultimately fail. The truth announced that it was as impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics and mechanics. I admitted, but told him that it was he and those acting with him who were warring against a principle. They were attempting to make things equal, which the Creator had made unequal. This to me is just the vitriol and psychosis of whiteness and white supremacy. It purports to know what civilization is. It purports to know what abundance or Western expansion is, when actually it's extracting the land. It's innovating forms of suffering that will inevitably harm not only other people, but itself. And it's based on a lie that it has created, and then it creates the conditions for that lie to be true. And if someone says, I came here legally, and immigrants came here, and they're stealing all our money, and they're beating people up, and they're criminals, if the statistics and the news and the actual reality does not support that claim, how do you make that hierarchy a reality? You use your institutions, your military, your police force, your media, your loyalists to tell the lie again and again and again until it becomes true. You use this position of power over others as a way to manufacture consent to then go out and to treat these people as the lie you have told says they need to be treated. I was reading A Brief History of Fascist Lies. It talks explicitly about like how Hitler did this throughout his reign. He purported Jews as dirty, as corrupt, as laundering money, as perverse, as subhuman. And then he funded the science that would uphold that. He created art and erased media and literature and institutions that spoke to the complexity of Jewish identity and history. And he created the ghettos and herded Jewish folks into them and created the conditions for them to then be dirty, underserviced, under-resourced, and surveyed and repressed, consuming often more times than other content, not propaganda. If we're consuming things that are a fraction of these ideas that are based on hierarchy that put other people against us or us against them, we're not consuming propaganda. We're engaging in platforms that tell us how to live our lives, that put us in certain niches, that use the algorithm to couch us in a certain area that pushes us further and further into an ideology. But what we really need as a society to push back against fascism and all of these other forms of imperialist dominance is to be in shared space, to talk about the problems of our world and our society, and to understand that other people are not our enemy. It's the political elite, it's capitalism, it's the systems of hierarchy that are in place, and it's the idea that there is so much scarcity that we need to push other people out and dehumanize them, torture them, jail them, detain them, lie on them in order to have our peace, our civilization, our justice. Further on in this text by Jason Stanley, there's also some interesting parts about like viewing the other as urban versus rural life, and how fascist ideology rejects pluralism and tolerance. And so in fascist politics, everyone in the chosen nation shares a religion and a way of life. And this kind of microcosm between the rural and the urban, I think under Trump 2.0 is especially interesting if we think about the different kinds of folks that voted for Trump, whether it be in urban or rural life. I think about the economic stratifications in urban versus rural life, and how urban life for many marginalized people are epicenters of liberation, freedom, culture building. And so under a fascist project, of course, you're going to choose certain epicenters of subversion to be the political targets of where you send your shock troops. So if we look at what Trump is doing with ICE, it falls exactly within that strategy.
Are you in this family? Hello? Are you in this family? Dinner time is family time. What is this trash you're reading?
It's not trash, Daddy. It's lovely. It's called Moby Dick by Herman Melville.
Moby what? This is filth. Trash. Here.
That's not mine. It's a library book.
Trash. I'm fed up with all this reading. You're a wormwood, you start acting like one. Sit up and look at the TV.
Users are not liable for any skin irritation. It may result from playing our game. Get real sticky and get cash for free. All right, that's enough. Let's get sticky!
And then next we have the criminalization of dissent and the capture of dissent on the most visible level. And the distinction here is not to say that the US as it stands already doesn't criminalize dissent, and that there hasn't been Quintel-Pro, and that there haven't been other eras of violence against protesters. But I think the distinction with fascism is that this suppression and criminalization of dissent is so on the public stage that it is completely irrefutable. And it is also a complete necessity, because not only is it the fact that there isn't going to be a two-party system anymore because fascism literally becomes the only party, but it's then that fascism, its only mode of reacting, of establishing law and order, is to target people that are unpure, or to target people that are so unpatriotic that they would go against what nationalism claims that everyone should be doing. I mean, an example of this, I think, over the last number of years that we've seen some conclusions to is the RICO charges against various activists from the Stop Cop City movement. And this article came out about a month ago, and it reads, and to give you context, the Stop Cop City movement was a movement against a new law enforcement facility that was meant to be built in Georgia that was going to be constructed to the tune of, I think, $109 million. And over a number of years, a variety of community organizations, activists, activists, leftists, indigenous folks converged together to oppose this new facility and to really talk about how this is a blueprint for how the carceral state wants to expand all around different parts of the country. This led to various folks being arrested and charged on racketeering charges, which are usually reserved for the mafia. Joseph Brown, a political scientist who has written about the movement against Cop City, said Georgia, quote, was so hell-bent on criminalizing a protest movement that was strong, resilient, and popularly supported, it decided to use law as a political tool, unquote. Brown compared the case to the so-called G20 protests, where more than 200 were arrested at a 2017 protest in Washington, D.C., targeting Donald Trump's first presidential inauguration. They faced felony, riot, and conspiracy charges of conspiracy in a case drawn out over more than a year. The state was found to have withheld evidence as well as committing other irregularities. Ultimately, nearly all cases were dismissed and only one person served jail time. We see examples of prosecutorial overreach in highly politicized cases, Brown said. Farmer's decision makes the Cop City case probably the highest profile failure of using conspiracy charges to indict a protest movement. And what I want to make clear here is that the criminalization of dissent under any political system, I think, serves a number of functions. I mean, we can look at COINTELPRO as an example. I mean, that was meant to target anti-war protesters, the hippies and free love movement, as well as the Black Panther Party and the Weather Underground and other organizations like the Black Liberation Army and the Young Lord. And it was because these were organizations that were mobilizing and organizing. They were able to articulate the crisis of the moment and build popular support. They were able to organize different things on a direct action and institutional level that allowed them to gain the public's trust. And COINTELPRO operated as a way to survey people, to sow fear, to develop paranoia, and either to incarcerate people indefinitely or to have them be so scared that they would flee the movement, or to detain them for long enough that they would just be off of the streets, and ideally the movement would lose its figureheads, or movements would funnel all sorts of labor and money towards legal defense, which theoretically can disrupt any movement. And there's been a lot of discourse around the Black Panther Party and how the Free Huey Newton campaign, the Panther 21 case, among other things, really shifted the party's concentration from survival programs to legal defense and combating legal repression. It's interesting that we're in a time where I can look back at the last 10 years and be like, okay, I remember that movement, I remember that movement, I remember that movement. And still, repression is on the rise. The White House is trying to portray Antifa as a terrorist organization. These accusations are dog whistles for who they plan to dehumanize, who they plan to paint as criminal, and who they plan to put resources towards targeting, surveying, locking away, or trying to scare into not fighting the rising fascism that we have. And in my mind, a lot of it is that populism tries to identify, I think populism, when wielded by fascism especially, it tries to identify enemies of not only the state, but more precisely, enemies of the people that have contributed to or created the social or economic crises that are occurring. And by naming these enemies and hyperbolizing them and spreading disinformation and propaganda, we can begin to have a scenario where populism leads to a moment like we have in the US and beyond today, where as long as you or I have the same enemy, we could potentially be on the same side. How do common people react to common issues? And how does the elite manipulate our perspective on the social and economic conditions at play to instead turn away from criticizing the elite and how they hoard resources and profit, and instead turn it towards how certain kinds of people are corrupting society and deserve to be jailed, institutionalized, detained, arrested, kicked out, tortured, or killed, and how this all is a slippery slope. It is typically a blame game. It's trying to figure out what group of people are to blame for the conditions that were created by capitalism and maybe are exacerbated by certain modes of behavior or actions, but ultimately are the fault of the elite who aim to control the narrative and tell us who the problem is and how to solve it. And what did Hitler consider the final solution? in terms of the populism that he was spewing, genocide. I've been thinking of fascism as we all grew up in a society where all of the systems at play don't make sense. And on some level, we're aware that something's off, something's weird, maybe we don't fit in, maybe we do. But there are certain kinds of people or bodies or backgrounds where from birth you have been locked out. You haven't been considered normative. You haven't been considered a part of the system. You have to fine tune your behavior and be policed and be stigmatized or bullied. There's always a lie that we're told to believe in order to fall in line. For me, when I think about fascism, the lie is there is someone trying to invade your country, your safety, your home. And in order to protect what you have, you need to understand that these people are evil. They're the enemy. They're subhuman. They don't deserve or can't be a part of civil society. And so the dehumanization of another group then becomes a solution, as opposed to viewing white supremacy, viewing imperialism, viewing war profiting as the puppet strings that are controlling so many of the things that we're experiencing. And what world are we trying to create? What is creation to you or I? To the fascist, creation necessitates the ethno-state. It necessitates extraction. It necessitates suppression. It necessitates the continuous configuration and reconfiguring of the lie that tells everyone to have ultimate allegiance to the state. For other people, for marginalized people, for me, the lie growing up was masculinity means that violence is a clarifying force. It's a clarifying way of acting. It's a clarifying way of showing up in the world. It gives you power. It gives you dominance. And what I realized at a very early age was that patriarchal violence leads to trauma like what I experienced in my mother growing up in terms of her relationship with my father. And that lie made me the enemy to my mother in many ways. And what I had to deconstruct in both my denial of cis heteronormative kind of gender expressions, I had to deny the idea that all men are the same, had to be the same. I had to deny the idea that I needed to find worth in my community by being tough, by being okay with exhibiting violence all the time, by seeing violence as a tool that would make me legible to other people. But what I discovered over time is that the lie was trying to keep me in line. The lie was trying to put me in a mode of behavior that aligned me with other men that could have power or be protected or protect others. When in reality, I didn't want to be this version of a man. I wanted to be something beyond it. I wanted to turn away from the lie that I've been given and choose modes of behavior that gave me a deeper truth. And those deeper truths were found in punk scenes, in protests, in reading radical history about my life, in writing and synthesizing my own life and experiences, and realizing when someone in power or power over you tells you who you are, how to be, and how it best helps society in the world, and they spend no time listening to you, they actually don't give a fuck about you. It's not about you. It's about power. It's about control. And it's about you falling in line. And whether it be the fascist reality of growing up in a homophobic family or the fascist reality of growing up in a country built on imperialism and genocide, I view the liberation process, the process of critical thinking, of imagination, of trusting and believing in community instead of viewing others as the intrinsic enemy. I view that as the pathway to liberation. I view that as being in line with anti-fascism. And that's what I want to talk about in part 2 of this video, which will be more about anti-fascism and its history and the different tactics and politics around it. But it feels necessary to situate all of this in defining fascism and how it shows up in our interpersonal relationships in our lives, how things like the gender binary or transphobic violence or misogynoir are all expressions of trying to control the other. And so if we can fight against those, if we can name those, we can begin to oppose the many different ways that fascisation happens in all of our lives. And that, I think, is what the government is fucking afraid of. So don't let these fuckers scare you.
MAGA communism. Now, it sounds crazy. I wish I were making this up, but there's an actual movement trying to merge Trump-style nationalism with socialist rhetoric. They call it MAGA communism. This guy, Jackson Hinkle, is leading the charge. And the idea is to take left-wing economic language, strip it of solidarity with workers, and twist it into this nationalist authoritarian mess. And there are some hardcore MAGA fans that are looking at this and saying, that's the wrong direction. It's fringe for now, but the fact that it exists really shows how fractured and desperate the right-wing movement has become.
Last thing I want to talk about in this video about the rise of fascism and what fascism really is the kind of mystery element that is kind of underpinning all of this. And it's social media and the internet age. We are so entangled with social media and the content that we're consuming, for some, is inevitably radicalizing propaganda. And I've talked about this at various points in different videos, whether it be how my fascism has become monetized video, or looking at different internet figures and the memification of politics and how that fed into the 2024 election, and how certain ideologies, especially related to xenophobia and various claims about immigrants eating dogs and cats. The alt-right pipeline is so enmeshed, especially with social media, whether it be gaming communities, whether it be cottagecore, whether it be looks maxing, the manosphere. A person can go online and create a social media account. That social media account can become a brand that is incentivized by rage farming or conservative ideologies, or centering in on the deep state, or spreading conspiracy theories. And the emotionality, the intensity, the claims behind the content begin to drive controversies that gain clicks, that feed the algorithm, that push more and more into rage farming. So much of US political life is about contending with loneliness, with lack of community, with draining resources, with people not having enough, and the populism being a simple and easy answer towards, one, blaming another person, but also wanting to view yourself as a mythic leader. The parasocialness of social media. Certain people rise to such a level that their fan base becomes their constituents, and their constituents fund their lives, their career, and their constituents become the shock troops that begin to attack other people that critique them. The more we are meshed with social media, the more we inherently are entering these social, political, and existential systems that are literally based on hierarchy. Our followers numbers, our analytics, the amount of engagement we get, all of these are tiered systems of looking at how we're valued in the world. And based on the emotions that we offer, based on the ways that we perform, based on the myths and truths and facts or lack thereof that we present online, anything can become possible. The way that the White House has restructured its briefing room, kicking out what it perceives as legacy media, bringing in an entire section that is curated specifically for content creators, bringing in podcasters, alt-right folks, people that are into conspiracy theories. It's not only that the social media corporations are incentivizing this, but we also have a state now that is incentivizing people that are willing to spread disinformation, because if we look at the rise and ascension of Charlie Kirk, establishment of Turning Point USA, going on college campuses and documenting these debates, and the notion of debating Nazis, debating the plausibility of white supremacy and eugenicists, becoming fuel and fodder for social media, whether it be Jubilee or whether it be Turning Point USA's personal social media feed. Social media is an amazing tool of spreading information, of bringing people into topics, issues, ideologies that they wouldn't otherwise be aware of. I came up, yes, with the internet and social media, but I was kind of the first generation to have a childhood half offline and half online. I remember the early disgusting minstrel days of the early internet. Not to say that it's completely gone now, but the internet felt like a different time, and radicalization was definitely apparent, but the financially incentivizing forces weren't there. And if people can turn into brands, and brands can become corporations, and corporations become political demagogues, what are we to do in this climate? And a lot of it, I think, is we have to build out new systems of sharing news and information. We need to develop alternatives. We need to practice critical thinking and journalism and dialectical materialism, find ways of showing that through the things that we produce online and the ways that we engage with each other offline. should we be doing this online or should it be offline? But I think there needs to be both of these things that are at play. We need to find ways to wage the cultural revolution on these platforms that we do and don't own. And we also need ways for politics to become material, to become real, because this is a part of what makes fascism so enticing, the populism of it. It speaks to the failures of the state or the deep state. It incentivizes people to go out and act and commit various forms of violence or hate. And what I believe liberatory movements need are more emotionally and politically engaging counter narratives, and also sites of resistance that are in our physical spaces and lives. And so I really, really compel people that are consuming content, consuming things online, to find simple ways that you can begin to politicize or engage politically with those around you, whether that be a meetup where you and your friends talk about politics, whether it be engaging with the logistics of what an emergency support network would look like, what kind of people can house certain people, what kind of resources can be gathered and offered, can people drive to pick up groceries or other things that are needed for childcare, and how can we find ways to build out systems in our physical communities to combat the fascism that's inevitably on the rise. And it's a deeper conversation, but it's something I want to develop into my videos next year. But looking at the internetification of fascism and the alt-right pipeline and kind of studying that more and engaging with what these tech elite and social media elite really think, because they want to deregulate, they want to scrub away privacy, and they are literally, their hands are in the pockets of the Trump administration. So what are we to do in this climate scenario, and how do we face what's coming in the next 3 years and beyond? These are questions that I'm deeply invested in, and I hope this video helped ground you in some of the elements of fascism as we know it today. I have a couple other videos on the line for this year. We'll see what comes up this year or next year, but I definitely plan to do a video kind of exploring what Trump's base is and really naming that and defining it. And then also I want to do a deep, deep, deep video into the histories of anti-fascism that are apparent and we can tap into and should understand, because anti-fascism involves so many things. It's not just black bloc. It's not just going where we go, where they go. It's about modes of cultural and political production that can help us beat back these Nazis and take care of each other. So thank you for watching another video on my channel, and stay tuned until next time.